The desert air was dry and still, the kind that made every breath feel heavy. Sarah Walker, a former U.S. military officer, pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders as she made her way down the quiet road. She had seen a lot in her years of service, things most people wouldn't believe. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what was about to happen. She had left the military a few years back, trading in the structured life of a soldier for something quieter. But tonight, fate had other plans. Her car, an old but reliable truck, had sputtered and died in the middle of nowhere. With no cell service and miles away from the nearest town, she had no choice but to wait. The night stretched on, silent and empty, until a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. The vehicle pulled up beside her, a sleek black SUV, its engine barely making a sound. The door opened, and out stepped a figure she never expected to see in person: Donald Trump. For a moment, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Was this real? The former president of the United States, standing right in front of her in the middle of the desert. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Why was he here? Was this some kind of elaborate joke? But before she could say a word, Trump looked at her with an expression that sent a chill down her spine. "You're exactly who I've been looking for," he said. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was no ordinary encounter. Whatever was happening, it was about to change everything. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The weight of Trump's words hung in the air, thick with mystery. Exactly who he'd been looking for. That didn't make sense. She was just a veteran trying to move on from her past. There was no reason for a man like him to know her name, let alone seek her out. She studied his face, searching for some kind of explanation, but his expression gave nothing away. The SUV's engine hummed softly, the headlights casting long shadows across the empty road. For a moment, all she could hear was the wind rustling through the dry brush and the faint clicking of her truck cooling down. Finally, she found her voice. "I think you've got the wrong person." Trump shook his head, his gaze steady. "No, you're exactly who I need." Her pulse quickened. She had spent years in the military learning to stay calm under pressure, but this was different. She wasn't on a battlefield, wasn't facing an enemy she could see. This was something else, something she couldn't quite grasp. "I don't understand," she said cautiously. "What do you want from me?" He glanced around as if checking for unseen eyes before taking a step closer. "There's something happening, something bigger than you can imagine, and you're one of the few people who can help." Sarah tensed. She didn't like being pulled into things she didn't understand. Her days of following orders were over. But something in his voice, something urgent, made her hesitate. Before she could press for answers, the sound of another engine cut through the night. A second vehicle, moving fast. Trump's expression darkened. "They found us," he muttered. Sarah barely had time to react before the SUV's door swung open. Sarah's instincts kicked in before she could fully process what was happening. The roar of the approaching vehicle grew louder, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a blade. Trump's jaw tightened as he reached for the SUV's door, motioning for her to get in. "Now," he said, his voice low but firm. Every part of her training told her not to follow blindly, but something about the way he said it, the urgency in his voice, the tension in his posture, told her this was bigger than her hesitation. She slid into the passenger seat just as the second vehicle screeched to a halt a few yards away. The doors flew open. Silhouettes moved against the glare of the headlights, their movements sharp and purposeful. Sarah couldn't make out faces, but she knew that kind of presence. Tactical, trained, these weren't ordinary people. Trump gripped the wheel. "Buckle up." Before she could question anything, the SUV lurched forward. Tires kicked up dust and gravel as they sped away. The other vehicle gave chase, its engine growling behind them. Sarah's mind raced. Who were those people? Why was Trump running? And why had he dragged her into this? "You mind telling me what the hell is going on?" she demanded, keeping her eyes on the side mirror as the pursuing car closed in. Trump exhaled sharply, gripping the wheel tighter. I don't have time to explain everything, but let's just say, not everyone wants the truth getting out. That only made her more uneasy. What truth? Instead of answering, he reached into the center console and pulled out a small black device. He pressed a button, and the screen flickered to life, revealing a map with blinking red dots, dozens of them. Sarah's stomach tightened. She had seen military-grade tracking systems before. This wasn't just about them. This was bigger, much bigger. They're not just after me, Trump said. They're after anyone who knows. Sarah clenched her jaw. She had no idea what she had just walked into, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back now. The SUV tore down the desolate road, the tires gripping the pavement with a screech as Trump pressed harder on the gas. The pursuing vehicle wasn't letting up, closing the distance with alarming speed. Sarah's pulse pounded in her ears. Whoever was after them wasn't just looking to talk. Her mind raced through possibilities. Was this some kind of political attack? A deep state operation? A rogue faction of something bigger? None of it made sense, and the lack of answers only made her grip the seat tighter. Trump glanced at the screen again, his expression unreadable. They've been tracking us for a while, but you showing up here, that wasn't part of their plan. Sarah's stomach churned. So why me? What do I have to do with any of this? Trump didn't answer right away. The SUV swerved sharply, narrowly missing a roadblock that hadn't been there seconds before. Two black-clad figures leaped from the shadows, weapons raised. "Hold on," Trump muttered. The vehicle jolted as he made a hard right, skidding onto a dirt path that led into the hills. Sarah barely had time to brace herself as they bounced over the uneven terrain, dust billowing behind them. The other car followed without hesitation. She turned to Trump, frustration and adrenaline boiling over. "You need to start talking. Now." He let out a breath, his knuckles white against the wheel. "There's a file. A list of names. People who were never supposed to be found." He shot her a look. "You're on it." Sarah's blood ran cold. She had done her time, followed the rules, left the military behind. There was no reason she should be involved in anything like this. But before she could ask another question, the SUV lurched violently. The chase car had rammed into them, sending them fishtailing toward a steep drop. Sarah's breath caught as the edge of the cliff came into view. There was nowhere left to run. The SUV skidded sideways, gravel spitting from the tires as Trump fought for control. The cliff's edge loomed closer, the drop below disappearing into darkness. Sarah's breath came in short, sharp bursts. This was it. They were seconds away from going over. Then, at the last possible moment, Trump yanked the wheel hard left. The SUV lurched violently, tilting on two wheels before slamming back down. The chase car wasn't as lucky. It tried to follow the sharp turn, but its momentum carried it too far. Sarah watched as the vehicle skidded, its tires screaming against the dirt before it plummeted over the edge. A second later, a distant crash echoed through the night. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then Trump hit the gas again. "We don't have long before more of them show up." Sarah exhaled sharply, her hands still gripping the door. "I need real answers," she demanded. "What the hell did I do to end up on that list?" Trump hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's not what you did, it's what you know." Her mind reeled. What could she possibly know that would make her a target? She had done classified work, sure, but nothing that would warrant this kind of pursuit. Before she could press him further, a sharp beeping sound erupted from the dashboard. Trump's eyes flicked to the screen, and for the first time, Sarah saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before: fear. "They've locked onto us," he muttered. Sarah's stomach twisted. "Who?" Trump gripped the wheel tighter. "The people who control everything." A second later, a low rumble shook the ground beneath them. Sarah turned her head just in time to see something streak across the sky, something fast. Then, in a flash of light, everything exploded. The explosion tore through the night, a blinding burst of fire and metal. The shockwave sent the SUV spinning out of control. Sarah barely had time to brace herself before they slammed into a rocky embankment. The impact knocked the wind out of her, her vision flickering as the world tilted sideways. Smoke filled the air. The scent of burning fuel stung her nose. Dazed, she forced herself upright, her ears ringing. Trump was slumped over the wheel, motionless. Panic surged through her as she reached over, shaking his shoulder. "Hey, stay with me." He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. Relief washed over her, but it didn't last long. The ground trembled again, a warning that whoever had fired that shot wasn't finished. They had to move. Sarah fumbled with the door handle, shoving it open. The SUV was wrecked, its front end crushed against the rocks. Their pursuers weren't far behind. "Come on," she urged, helping Trump out of the car. His movements were slow, but he pushed forward, his face set with determination. A distant hum caught Sarah's attention. She turned her head and froze. A sleek, unmarked helicopter hovered in the distance, its floodlights sweeping over the desert like a predator searching for prey. Trump exhaled sharply. "We're out of time." Sarah's mind raced. They had no weapons, no backup. Just each other and the mystery that had led them to this moment. Then, just when she thought they were cornered, a second explosion rocked the air, this time behind them. The helicopter veered off course, a streak of smoke trailing from its tail. Sarah whipped around, searching for the source. A lone figure stood on the ridge, rifle in hand. Her heart stopped. She knew that stance, that silhouette. It was someone from her past, someone she never expected to see again. The figure lowered the weapon and stepped into the moonlight. "Looks like you could use a little help," the familiar voice called out. Sarah's breath caught. Everything she thought she knew had just changed again. Sarah's breath hitched as she locked eyes with the figure standing on the ridge. For a moment, everything else faded. The burning wreck, the distant hum of the damaged helicopter, even Trump beside her. It was him, a face she hadn't seen in years, a face she thought she'd never see again. "Logan," she whispered, barely believing it. He gave her a small, knowing smirk, the same one he used to flash back when they served together. "Still standing, Walker." Sarah exhaled sharply, snapping back to the present. There was no time for questions, not yet. Logan moved quickly, descending toward them while keeping his rifle raised. The helicopter was retreating now, smoke trailing behind it, but she knew they weren't safe, not completely. Trump let out a breath. "Didn't think you had any friends left." Sarah shot him a look. "Neither did I." Logan reached them, his eyes scanning the wreckage. "We need to move. Now." Sarah didn't argue. With Logan leading the way, they hurried across the rugged terrain. The distant glow of headlights flickered on the horizon. Reinforcements, no doubt. But Logan seemed to know where he was going, weaving through the landscape like he had planned for this moment. After what felt like an eternity, they reached an old, abandoned outpost. Logan gestured for them to get inside. "You're not gonna believe half of what I have to tell you," he muttered. Sarah shook her head. "Try me." As the doors shut behind them, the weight of everything settled in. She had started this night alone, broken down on the side of the road. Now she was in the middle of something far bigger than she ever imagined. And somehow she knew this was only the beginning.